She named him Moses because she drew him out of the water. Saved to save. It is something to think about the situation into which Moses was born and consider what he was up against from the time he was delivered from his mother's womb and entered the world. The king of Egypt had devised an evil scheme that struck at the heart and pride of the Israelites. The killing of the male children born to Israelite families. In the story we just read of the birth of Moses, we learn of three factors that led the king to take the position he did, to devise such a cruel plan. First, he did not know Joseph. Recall how Joseph came to be in Egypt. We reflected on the story of Joseph last week, sold by his brothers who hated him because of his dreams to a group of traders who in turn sold him to Pharaoh's officer in Egypt. Joseph was jailed on false accusation, and later he was appointed as second in command in Egypt because he made an accurate interpretation to a dream the Pharaoh had. And that was a different Pharaoh from the one we are thinking about today. Due to the famine that had affected not only Egypt, but some of the surrounding places, Joseph's brothers came to Egypt to look for grain. And eventually Joseph's family settled in Egypt. There was this wonderful reunion of a family that was once estranged from each other. The other factor that led the Pharaoh at the time, to take the position he did, was that the king felt threatened by the growing number and strength of the Israelites in the land of Egypt, and planned to keep their population in check by enslaving them and inflicting hard labor on them in an attempt to wear them out and make their lives bitter. Even with this, we are told that the Israelites continue to flourish, they continue to grow, and they continue to do well. The other factor that moved the king to make this decision to have all the Hebrew boys thrown in the river Nile was that there were two Egyptian midwives whom he ordered to kill the child if it was a male child while they were attending a Hebrew woman giving birth. When the midwives refused to obey the king's order, the king resorted to this wicked design of ordering his people to throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the Nile River. Countless male children perished, and there was heavy grief among the Israelites because of the death of their children. Pharaoh could not have dealt a more devastating blow to this nation within his own nation. It was in this context that Moses was born, and from this evil scheme that he was delivered. And so our text today refers to the actions of Pharaoh's daughter. She said to herself, I pulled him out of the water, and so I named him Moses. Exodus chapter 2, verse 10. My dear brothers and sisters, there are some important lessons to be learned from this story. First, Moses was saved because of his mother's ingenuity. Because of her creativity, Moses was saved. In the story of Moses' birth, we see a woman who did her best to protect her son from the evil that was around him. A woman who used her creativity to ensure that her son was saved from the evil that surrounded him. The text says she hid him. And you know, my friends, that is the role of parents, to hide or protect their young and vulnerable children from evil for as long as they possibly can. I believe that the role of parents is to protect those vulnerable ones from the evil that is all around for as long as they possibly can. And that's what Moses' mother did. Using her creativity, she didn't want him exposed too early to the evil that was present. But the time came when she could no longer hide him. And that time does come for all parents, when they can no longer keep their children sheltered and hidden from the harsh realities of life, but must release them to face these things. Every parent reaches that point when they must let their children go to face life on their own. And what I see in the story of Moses is a mother that did her best to prepare her son for that time, to prepare her child for that time when she could no longer hide him, when matters, as it were out of her hands. She made a special waterproof basket, put her baby in it, and placed it among some reeds along the bank of the Nile. In other words, Moses' mother devised her own plan in order to counter the plan, the wicked plan that King Pharaoh had put in place. For all parents, the time comes when they can only wait to see what will happen to their children. Even when we have done our best, we have laid the best plans for our children, we can only wait and see what would occur. Anything could have happened to Moses on that occasion. Just think about it, my sisters and brothers. Just think about the possibilities. What could have happened to this young, vulnerable child? But his mother prepared him well. And even when she had done all she could in the circumstances, she had another looking out for her baby. Big sister was there looking out for this vulnerable baby, Moses. Parents ought not to neglect their duty in preparing their children in every way to face life's uncertainties, challenges, and struggles. It is the duty of parents to provide their children with a solid foundation, especially of faith, so that they can go out and not drift into the threatening river that might destroy them. It is the duty of every parent, every godparent, every grandparent, to help to prepare children so that they will have a strong foundation and that they will not drift too far into the threatening streams of life. I see in this story another lesson. Moses was saved because of Pharaoh's daughter's sympathy and her audacity. When the princess opened it, she saw the baby, the text says. The little boy was crying and she felt sorry for him. This must be one of the Hebrew children, she said. There's no telling, my dear friends, what would have happened to Moses had the princess of Egypt not found him and felt sorry for this crying baby in a basket. In addition to feeling sorry for this baby, she showed great audacity in taking him as her own, in adopting him as her own child, even though she realized that he was one of the Hebrew children, and she was fully aware of her father's order to throw all the newly born Hebrew boys into the Nile. It took some courage, some bravery, some boldness on the part of Pharaoh's daughter to act in the way she did. And I think, my friends, of the lines that this princess crossed in order to save Moses. I think of the national and religious lines that she crossed. She, an Egyptian, he, a Hebrew child. The social lines. She, the daughter of a king, he, the child of a slave. She crossed some barriers in order to show compassion. She took some bold risks in order to save Moses. But thank God for people who know how to combine sympathy and audacity. Those who feel compassion for others and are willing to take bold risks for the sake of others. Thank God for such people. And that was Pharaoh's daughter. And my sisters and brothers, we all owe our presence here and our freedom to people who have compassion and at the same time they had guts. They were bold in taking risks to save others. And so was Pharaoh's daughter. Her action played a significant part in saving Moses' life. She named him Moses because she drew him out of the water. She pulled him out of the water, the text says. It was that same water that became the watery grave of so many of Moses' contemporaries, of so many in Moses' time, from which he was drawn. He was saved from that water in which so many baby boys of his day perished. And so the king's daughter rescued Moses. And what I like about this story, it always makes me chuckle. When I think of how she turned around and paid Moses' mother in order to take care of her own son. And I always like to say, it pays, my sisters and brothers, to take care of children. It pays to take care of your children and prepare them for a life of service to God and humanity by your example of faith that through God's providence, they will be saved from evil. And the last thing I would like us to take with us today is that Moses was saved so that he in turn could save others from Pharaoh's tyranny. Moses was saved in order that he might save others from Pharaoh's tyranny. You know, every day that we live, we should be mindful that there is a purpose why we are here. She named him Moses because she pulled him out of the water. There is a reason for your living. I am here because is a good phrase to begin each day And then we should go on to fill in the reason. I am here because of X, Y, Z. And this will help give direction to one's life. I imagine that as Moses grew and learned the story of his survival, he must have felt not only privileged, but also a sense of duty to God and the people he represented. Beginning with his mother's creativity and the sympathy and audacity of the king's daughter who found and rescued him from the Nile, Moses was saved for a purpose. God would use Moses to help save others from Pharaoh's tyranny. I imagine, my friends, the privileges that Moses enjoyed as he grew up in the palace. But they were not privileges that made him blind to the suffering of his own people, but helped to prepare him to work for their liberation, for their freedom. He was saved in order that he might help to save others. He was delivered from that watery grave in order that he might help deliver others, that he might help them to cross the water to a land of liberty and freedom. So let us learn from the story of Moses' birth how to be creative, compassionate, and bold in seeking freedom and salvation for all. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.